humans of the world, I'm Pragya Gargi, and every second Tuesday I sit down with a case under the True Crime series to discuss with y'all. So if you're interested in serial killers, skulls, UFO, paranormal activities, basically anything spooky kooky, please consider subscribing to my channel. So today's case is very creepy. Like the first time I read it, it literally sent chills on my bones. So it could be a little disturbing and distressing to some of the viewers, hence discretion is advised. Now I can see from my video analytics that 50% of you watching this video right now are not subscribed to my channel. Why? Why are you doing this? Just show some support to your girl and hit that subscribe button if you like the content of the videos I make. When the policemen started searching for the 15-year-old missing Rachel Barber, they considered many possibilities, mainly being that she must have run away from the home. But when they started digging deeper into the case, they found out something so unexpected they could not have thought of it in their wildest dreams. Fifteen-year-old Rachel Barber was an exceptional dancer. She had left conventional high schooling to join the dance factory. She was so passionate about it that she used to practice in her break time, and her parents had removed the carpet from the flooring to reveal polished wooden floor so she could practice even more at her house. When she was a child, she used to choreograph performances for her sister, and basically everyone in the family was very artistic and creative. And Rachel was just a dainty, pretty young girl. She wanted to become a professional dancer when she grew up and open her own studio. She was even enrolled in a 2-week modeling course, and she was tall, she had green piercing eyes, she was slim, and eventually she was even featured in Lifestyle magazine, which is Australia's fitness magazine of sorts. So she was headed to a successful life path. On 1st March 1999, she wore long black pants, a blue top, carried a black bag with wallet and a purple cushion with herself to give to her boyfriend, which is so cute, and she just waved her mother bye, and she was going to go with her dad to a tram stop where her dad would drop her and pick her up in the evening later. Now Rachel was beautiful and bright on the stage, but as a person she was very shy. She was not so confident in using the public transport herself. So her dad used to sometimes drop her and sometimes her mom used to drop her. And today was her dad's turn. When she arrived to her dance academy, she met up with her friends, she met up with her boyfriend Manny, and she gifted the purple cushion to him she had made herself. And it was all going on like a regular day, except that she told them that day that tonight I'm going to make heaps of money, I'm going to get a lot of free clothing, and the platform shoes that she was eyeing for a long time, like she really liked these shoes she saw in a shop. She said that the next day she's going to buy those $100 platform shoes, and tonight she's gonna get all of that money. When her friends asked like, how are you going to get so much of money, she was being very secretive about it. She was like, no, well, I'm not supposed to talk about it, it's confidential. All that I can say is that I'm going to meet an older female friend of mine. At around 5:35, her class got over, and she told her friends that today she's gonna take a tram which was a few stops ahead from what she usually took. And when her friends were like, let us escort you, she said, no, it's gonna be fine, I'll go by myself. My dad will be on the other end picking me up at 6:15, and at 5:45 the friends and Rachel, they separated. At 7:15 p.m. that evening, Elizabeth Barber, Rachel's mother, was cooking dinner in her house, and she could see that father and daughter, both of them had not arrived. There were no signs of them, and she was kind of getting worried because Michael, Rachel's father, usually picked her up at around 6:15, and they used to be home at 6:30 or so. But they were not home yet, and it made her feel very uneasy. At 7:40, the Barber family's phone rang. Elizabeth picked it up, and it was Michael calling.
Michael told Elizabeth that Rachel had not got off the tram and she could not be found anywhere. So Michael and Elizabeth, they both went and they searched few other tram stops, but they could not find Rachel. They went to the police station, and when they reported that Rachel was missing, the police did not take it urgently at all. They had a very laid back attitude. They said that statistics quote that 98% of lost teenagers turn up in the next 48 hours. So they advised Michael and Elizabeth to wait out for at least the next 2 to 5 days. The police really did not help them in this situation.
2 days of searching, they finally started calling all the hospitals in Melbourne. They called them up, but the hospital said the privacy laws avoided them from giving away any names of the patients they had, and they could not disclose any identity. So next, flyers were printed. They were put up all through the area, and all the locals and acquaintances gathered around to find Rachel Barber. They were focusing on some older female because Rachel had mentioned that she was going to meet a female. By this time, a week had passed. But Alison, who was Rachel's friend's elder sister, she came forward to the family. She told them that she had seen Rachel with another girl. That girl and Rachel, they both looked like they knew each other. They were friendly and comfortable. And she had seen Rachel on the number 6 tram an hour later than when Rachel was last seen. She said that since she had not seen Rachel in that area before, this incident kind of stuck in her mind. She said that the other girl was very plain looking, and according to her description, the police made a sketch. Now, with the sketch in hand, Elizabeth and Michael started approaching media outlets, and on March 10, this news hit the press. Michael and Elizabeth, they were even interviewed by a true crime show which was called Australia's Most Wanted, and they relayed their story over there. They told that they had lost their daughter and they were desperately trying to find her. Mannequins wearing what Rachel had worn last were put up at various tram stops and crossroads. Looking at the sketch, Elizabeth said that she could recognize the eyes and the chin, but she could not put a finger on who that person was. So a list of associates was made. Everyone who ever knew Rachel. From that list, Elizabeth recognized Rachel's ex-babysitter, Caroline Reed Robertson, and she said that Robertson had a striking resemblance to the sketch. One day before Rachel's disappearance, a number had called Rachel twice. First, Rachel talked to the person on the other line for 15 minutes, and the second time she talked for 29 minutes. And both the times Rachel was talking very animatedly. She was laughing and she was giggling. So Elizabeth just concluded that she was perhaps talking to Manny. But when the number was run through, the police confirmed that the number was registered under the name of one Caroline Reed Robertson. Caroline Reed Robertson was a 19-year-old girl working in an office, staying in a rental apartment alone. She was suffering from severe depression. She had always grown up with very low self-esteem. She was marred with criticism, conflict, and she even had an epilepsy diagnosis. Her parents had divorced when she was a kid, and this just made everything worse for Caroline. Her father moved out and remarried another woman, and Caroline's relationship with her mother deteriorated in time. She was teased and bullied in her high school, and she really didn't want to go to school to study. She just hated it. She used to be a sort of a loner, and she wrote letters to her father. To quote, she said, "I really need help." In one of her letters, she drew very unflattering portraits of herself, calling herself selfish, pathetic, obese, weird, ugly, and white worm, amongst other terrible things. She had created an action plan on how to change in 9 weeks, and she even had created this club called I Hate Caroline Club, and she herself was the president in that. Caroline was so unhappy with herself. She felt so trapped in her own body that she wanted to assume a new identity. She wanted to create this fantastical world of her and just be this new, amazing, perfect person. And this image of a perfect, pure person was embodied in Rachel. Caroline was Rachel's neighbor for quite some time. She could see Rachel from her window dancing and flitting across her room beautifully. She was so poised and elegant, and she was a younger person whose life laid ahead of her, and she was sure to make full success of it. Caroline wanted to be that person. While babysitting Rachel, she became obsessed with her. She showed extreme affinity towards her. She photographed Rachel for her school project and she started writing details about Rachel, details about her features, her personality. She had written in her diary how Rachel had hypnotic green eyes and she was a wild, free spirit. Rachel was everything Caroline always wanted to be. And in her twisted mind, she concocted this plan to make her dream come true. She detailed a plan in her diary. She said that she would ensnare Rachel, she would drug and disfigure her, and after doing the deed, she would stain clean the carpet. She said that she felt like a lost, troubled soul in an alien environment full of angels. On March 10th, the police went to Caroline Roberts' workplace, and there they found that Caroline had called sick a lot of times in the past week. She was not coming to office and she was very irregular. The police went to her apartment and knocked. Caroline did not open the door. So they went and they talked to Caroline's dad. Caroline's dad told that yes, he had visited her around March 1st or 2nd, and at that time, Caroline had not opened her bedroom door the entire time he was there. And a neighbor of Caroline told that on March 2nd, he was awakened by sobbing sounds coming from Caroline's bathroom. So the police went back to Caroline's department. This time, they were determined to get into it. When they knocked and Caroline did not answer, they asked the landlord to get a spare set of keys. They put the keys in the door, but the door was jammed from inside, so the keys did not work. Hence, the policemen had to force their way inside the apartment. When they went inside, they found Caroline was lying down on her face on the floor. She seemed unconscious and she had had a seizure. She was alive and breathing, and the police, they immediately escorted her to the medical team and they took her to the hospital. Her room was very messy. There were moving boxes everywhere. There were alcohol bottles. Basically, everything was in a disarray. And then the police found these disturbing letters and diaries. They found details of Rachel written in these diaries, along with things like she hated school, she hated teachers, she hated work, and she was really very angry from within. On one of the pages, they found that she had written a new name, a new character for herself. She had described the character and named it as Jem Seathel. Seathel was the maiden name of Elizabeth. The police even found clothes which were of size 8. They were not Caroline's size, but they were a perfect size for Rachel. Of course, the police knew that there was a line to be drawn between Rachel and Caroline. Something was up. So they went to the hospital and they went up to Caroline and they just asked her about the whereabouts of Rachel. Caroline gave them a deadpan look. She simply said, "She's dead." The policemen were in shock. They asked, "Are you sure?" And she said, "Yes, I've buried her." When asked further, she revealed her sinister plan and what she had done to Rachel. Caroline had told Rachel that she would give her a lot of money and heaps of free clothing if she participated in a psychology project Caroline had from her college. All she had to do was just come to Caroline's place and do some very easy exercises. When she and Rachel arrived at Caroline's apartment, Caroline asked Rachel to do some mind-relaxing exercises. She asked her to breathe in and breathe out and think of happy thoughts. When Rachel was in the middle of doing this, Caroline came from behind and put a cord around her neck and strangled her. After snuffing the life out of Rachel's body, Caroline even hit her a few times. She said later in the court that when she was about to strangle Rachel, a thought came in her mind, a kind of thought which pulled her behind, which said that, "Don't go for it. Isn't this a little too extreme? This is going too far." But she went on with it anyways. She had come so long, she had made a lot of preparations. She had even laced a pizza with poison which Rachel had refused to eat. After keeping Rachel's body in her apartment for 2 days, she called for a rental removal truck and driver. She told the driver that it was a statue that had to be moved, and she had covered Rachel's body in 2 blankets. The truck dropped Caroline at Caroline's father's farm, which was located at a countryside. Over there, Caroline had taken Rachel's body and buried in a shallow grave, which she had dug herself. Caroline was, of course, charged with murder. During her first appearance in the court, she seemed like she did not felt guilty at all about what she had done, like she had not even realized the consequences of her actions. She just rocked back and forth in her chair, and she said that she does not remember anything about the incident or about killing Rachel. She just remembered that she had called Rachel over to her place and they had some pizzas, that's all. When she appeared in this hearing, everyone was stunned seeing her transformation. Caroline had gone from having wavy brown hair to straight blonde hair. Her skin was without any blemishes, it was very clear, and she had lost a tremendous amount of weight. She even looked a little more lively in her eyes. The court observed that this was a premeditated plan. It was not done in the heat of passion. It was something driven from a devious mind. Hence, Caroline was awarded with 20 years of sentence in jail with parole after 14 and a half years. Around 850 people gathered to mourn for Rachel. Her aunt said in her speech that Rachel would always be remembered as young and beautiful and dancing and flitting, and that is how I want to remember her as well. That is also the reason why I decided to do this case, because I wanted to throw some light upon this very undiscussed case and this young girl who was the victim of a sick mind. Caroline was released on parole in 2015, and the Babo family, they just said that we want her to live in a quiet life, not disturbing, not causing trouble for anyone else. That was all for today, guys. Have a wonderful time ahead. I hope you liked this video today. Please share it and like and subscribe to this channel. Take care of yourself, and if you have any other case for me to cover, please comment down in the section below. I'll see you next time around. Bye bye.